Hi, and welcome to this Friday's Facebook Live with me, Louisa Whitney from LKW Family Mediation. And apologies that I am late going live. I plan my diary out with appointments and doing online things like this, but sometimes it doesn't work out the way that I have planned because my job involves dealing with people who are emotional and upset. And one of the things that I believe passionately is that if that involves putting your diary out because someone's upset and they need a bit of extra help, then that's what I do. So apologies for being late today. Today I'm talking about the second in the series of blogs that I've been doing about making holiday arrangements with an ex-partner. And the blog that went up on Monday, if you've had a chance to look at it, is what happens when you hit an impasse. An impasse is probably a posh word for wall, when you simply cannot find a way forward. And that's the subject of today's blog. I think that's something that is probably a common scenario for most separated couples. You're trying to resolve something, you have really good intentions of working it out in an amicable way. You want the best for your children. Of course, you want the best for your children, but suddenly you want one thing, they want the other thing, and you feel a bit locked because you can't work out how to get round that. And that can be the case for anything, not just arrangements for holidays, but holiday arrangements can be a particularly thorny issue because of the fact that they come up every year. So it's not the same as when you sort out money arrangements when you separate and you've done it once and then you've got your way forward. Sometimes holiday arrangements can be difficult because it comes up every year, and that means that you can feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall every year, which is not a fun or ideal situation to be in. So if you feel like you have come up to a point where you're both stuck, what can you do? Firstly, take a little bit of time to regroup. When you both feel frustrated and fed up and cross with the situation, then often just having a little bit of space to breathe can be a good idea. And that's one of the reasons the last blog was about making sure that you've given yourself enough time to sort out holiday arrangements. Because if you know it's going to be difficult, having enough time to ensure you can each take a breather for few days, a week, 2 weeks before you come back to talking about it can be a really good thing. And it also gives you an idea to think about, right, how can we restart this conversation? There is a quote that I think has been attributed to Albert Einstein that says the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing the same way and expect a different result. I may be paraphrasing there, but that's the nub of it, that if you keep doing something the same way, why are you expecting the end result to be different? And that can be a big thing for separating couples because every relationship has its dynamic, and often those dynamics have played out many, many times over the course of the relationship. You know, it can be one person wants to talk about something, the other person doesn't want to talk about it, so shuts down and tries to avoid that conversation. The other person gets more frustrated, which means the other person shuts down more. It can be things like that. It can be other relationship dynamics around fears or around particular issues. Every relationship has its own dynamic, and those often continue to play out post-separation. So it could be that you've just got stuck in a rut with dealing with things in the same way, and that leaves you at the same point. So having a bit of a regroup can be a time to think about, right, how am I going to approach this situation differently? Because if you do things differently, maybe you'll end up with a different result. And I should say at this point that often there can be a notion of, well, why should I do things differently? Why should I try and sort things out when the other person isn't? I would give you an invitation at this point. Try doing things differently, and you might be surprised about how much of a difference just one person changing the way they speak, the way they deal with things, their behaviour, just one change from one person can alter dynamics between two people. The second point is compromise. And that's something that I think can be a thorny issue, because there can be one person that feels that they're always the one that compromises, which doesn't rule out the fact that the other person also thinks they're the person that always compromises. But sometimes if you offer a compromise, that can break a stuck situation. It might be something that incorporates one of the things the other person is wanting, or it may be a third option that neither of you had thought about before that might be a way forward. And it's a funny thing that sometimes if one person offers a compromise, the other person appreciates that and can often respond from a place of looking for a compromise as well. And again, that can be something that changes dynamics. People can get caught up in the whole cycle of, well, why should I compromise? Why does it have to be me? And that's something that is a narrative, and often each person has a narrative around their separation and relationship, and that can be, I'm the person that always compromises. And by changing that, you can sometimes change your narrative, which has an effect on the dynamic, and you change what you are telling yourself about the situation, and again, that can be quite powerful. The bottom line is that if you are parents, you are going to have a relationship with each other for a very long time to come. You know, even when your children are grown up, it doesn't rule out being together at weddings, at christenings, at graduations, at other significant events. So you need to be able to have some kind of accord wherever possible, and you are not going to be different people. You are still going to be the same people in the same situation. Neither of you are going to magically change overnight to make things more easy. So the question is, how can you work through this situation as best you can, given the people you are and the situation you're in? And sometimes a compromise that you've devised and you're proposing, so you're controlling what compromise you put forward, if you want to look at it that way, can be a way of resolving things, or just finding a way forward, or changing the dialogue between the two of you. If you find that none of that is working and you are simply stuck and getting progressively more annoyed with each other, then it might be the time to call in some support. And that might be from someone like me, like a mediator, who can sit with you both and help you to try to find a way forward. And mediators work by trying to understand what's happening between the two of you and identifying things that you may not be aware of that are happening between the two of you, and also suggesting other options that you may not have thought of. Sometimes people get very stuck in an either or mentality, so it's one parent's view or the other parent's view. And my role as a mediator to say, you only seem to be considering these two options. Have you thought about this, or have you thought about that, or how would that work? And it can just be seeing things from different angles. I sometimes think of it as, if you're stuck in a wood and you can't see further than the few trees around you, if somebody is able to climb up to the top of a tree, that gives you a much greater view around the wood, so that you are able to see much further around you and to get a sense of where you are in relation to other things, rather than just where you are in relation to each other in your small little bit. So that can be quite useful. The other thing to be aware of is that there is something called child inclusive mediation. And that is that children can have a voice in what's going on, and they can do that through mediation. So the mediator meets with parents and then meets with the children, so that they are able to give their views about what's happening. And that can be a really useful tool, because your children love you, and often it's really hard for them to tell mum something or tell dad something, because they might know they don't like it, or they might think they're going to be hurt by it, and so they're not saying things. By enabling them to talk to a third party and making it clear that whatever they say to the third party is absolutely fine, they're able to have a voice in what's going on, and that voice is then amplified by the mediator. That doesn't mean the children are choosing what happens next for them. Children always will know that the decision should rest with their parents. They're not making a choice, and certainly no mediator is going to say to them, would you live with mum or would you live with dad? It's more about gathering their views on the situation as far as they are willing to express them. There may be things they don't want said or aren't willing to talk about, but with situations like school holidays, they may have a really clear idea of how they would like to spend their school holidays, and it can be useful to have that come through a third party. It may also be helpful for you to speak to either a therapist who can help you with any emotional issues that are causing you to be stuck, whether that is because of the relationship dynamics between the two of you, or whether it's because there is something that is keeping you stuck in your conversations. You may have fears relating to things surrounding your children. Maybe your parents divorced and you spent some fairly hideous summer holidays with one parent or the other parent, or you felt really pushed and pulled, and that's informing your decision about what's right for your children. So working through issues like that can be really helpful for parents to enable them to move forward from that stuck place. What can also be quite useful is some more short-term help from somebody like a coach. So coaching isn't therapy. It enables you to look at where you're at and where you want to be, and to carve out steps that will take you from where you are to where you want to be. And coaches can also help you to develop skills that help with particular situations. So sometimes in difficult conversations between parents, there can be questions about language. Sometimes it can be the language that you use which is causing the problem. To give an example of this, where the children live with one parent and see the other parent, the parent who the children don't live with can often feel like they're having to ask permission to see their children, and that the parent the children live with is like the gatekeeper. And that can be something that can make people feel quite upset, and that they can be quite resentful about. So changing the language around that so that the parent who the children don't live with can feel they're not asking permission to see their children, they're just making arrangements about when the children are going to be with them. That can be a really significant change. It may also be helpful if you were both to have some kind of understanding of non-violent communication. And that is a particular language skill that enables you to approach discussions in a constructive way. It's something that's used by UNICEF and the UN and other charities going into difficult situations to try to have dialogue. If you are really, really stuck and there's a particularly contentious issue about the holidays, and sometimes it can be a particular discrete issue. So it's an issue that's not going to keep cropping up. It's something that needs to be dealt with once. And that can be things like where one parent doesn't want the other parent to take the children abroad, or it could be that one parent wants to take a special holiday for one particular reason, and that's causing a problem. Where there is a one-off issue like that, it can be helpful if you've really exhausted all options to just have somebody else decide things for you. But it can be difficult to get a court hearing in place in time for the holiday, because sometimes the court can take up to a year to resolve issues concerning children by the time you've gone through the different processes of hearings, possibly healing too. So that's where something like arbitration can be quite useful. Arbitration is available for issues concerning children, and you can appoint anybody who's a qualified arbitrator, and there are various solicitors and barristers who are qualified arbitrators, and you can appoint them to make a decision about what happens with regard to the issue that is facing you. And in arbitration, you have much more control over the process. The court tends to use a set process for dealing with issues concerning children. But you can ask the arbitrator to deal with things in a set way, whether you need an expert in children or child welfare or something like that to come in and report on it, or whether it's just an issue where mum thinks one thing and dad thinks the other thing, and you just need someone to come in and make a decision. And an arbitrator can deal with things within a set time frame. So if you needed a decision within 6 weeks before a holiday, then an arbitrator would be able to make the decision within that set time frame that you'd set out. What I would say is that if you are talking about an issue that is likely to be recurring, such as how you arrange the holidays each year, then yes, you can ask an arbitrator to make a decision for you, and they could make a decision to go forward. So they could say, do you know what, mum always has this half term, dad always has that half term, and the summer holidays are split like this. So you've then got that pattern going forwards. But that doesn't give you a lot of flexibility to deal with other issues that may crop up, such as if you change jobs and have to take holidays differently, if your children, as they become older, want to do other things in the holidays or go away with friends or anything like that. So having that flexibility can be quite useful. So if you've got issues that are cropping up every year, I would really encourage you to give some thought to how can we resolve this so that we don't have this problem every year. And that may well be getting support from another expert or someone who's going to help you to move forward and move past the stuck place that you often end up in. If you are also finding that you're stuck, I would really urge you to check in with how the other parent is feeling and why you think you might always end up in this stuck place, and to really go deep with what that's about. Because if I ask people, and I do, what's currently the biggest barrier to you finding a resolution? Often the answer might be, well, it's the other person because they are just stubborn, or it is because we just can't talk to each other. What is it that stops you being able to talk to each other? What is it that's making the other person dig their heels in about this? If you can really get underneath that top layer, then that's really likely to benefit you in working out how to move forward with this issue so that you're not coming back to it every single time. I hope that this has been useful. There won't be a Facebook Live next Friday, the 24th of May, but the next blog in this series will go live on Monday, so you'll be able to look at that. I am really excited to tell you that I've been developing some resources that will be downloadable from my website later on in the year to help couples that are separating to try to resolve things between themselves. I'm very aware that people can't always afford mediation services, afford lawyers, and I think that giving people the tools to be able to work things out themselves may be a really helpful way forward. So I will be sharing more details of those once I'm a bit further along with all the planning. But if you would like to know when they're going to be launched, the best thing to do is to join our free mailing list, and then you'll get all of our support and tools and things that I share with anybody going through a separation. It's completely free and it all comes into your mailbox, and then you'll find out what's happening. And you can sign up for that by going to bit.ly/LKW Family Med list. And if you're a professional watching this who works with couples or individuals going through a separation, and you think that you'd like to access the resources we share to share with your clients and to find out when those resources will be on the website, and you want details of the workshops and the networking events that I run for professionals working with couples and individuals going through a separation, then you can sign up to our professionals mailing list via bit.ly/LKW FamMed sign up. That's all for today, and I hope that you have a good weekend. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.